All right, well, thanks everyone for having me here today. I feel really excited and privileged to get to speak with you. And I wanted to tell you first before I get into my presentation, which, as you might have seen on the website, is called Facilitating Creativity. So we're going to get into that, but before that I just wanted to give a little bit of background about myself and where I came from and how I came to be here today. So I was actually born and raised in Livingston, Montana, just right over the hill, and graduated from high school there in 2006. And I went to Oregon for college. So I traveled over to Oregon. I moved to McMinnville, which is just a small little community south of Portland. And I went to a private school there called Linfield College. That's where I met my husband, and his name is Scott. He's from Salt Lake City. And he actually, when we were in college, was really passionate about putting on tea parties for our study groups. And so he was a huge dork about tea. He absolutely loved it in every way. He knew history of tea and religious culture, and he was studying religious studies, and I was studying anthropology and music. So we were both just having fun with our liberal arts, and by the time we graduated from college in 2010, we had to kind of sit down and say to ourselves, what are we actually going to do now? Are we going to use our degrees? Maybe, maybe not. So we were on a walk, and Scott just said, gosh, what are we going to do? And I said, well, what do you enjoy doing most? What's your passion? What do you love? And he said, well, I never really wanted to bring this to the surface, but I love making tea. And I said, well, why don't we do something with tea? And he said, I've always dreamed of having a tea shop. It's been this little secret dream of mine to run a tea shop. So I said, well, I don't know how to do that with my anthropology degree, but we can learn. We can learn how to do that. We can ask ourselves the right questions and give ourselves the right answers and find the resources we need and open a business. Why not? So that's what we ended up doing. It took about 4 years of us working in the tea industry and in other industries like the wine industry and management and learning business on the side. And here we are. We moved to Bozeman in 2014 and opened the tea shop that's just a couple blocks away. And the community received us, and we get to see a lot of your faces every day and drink tea together. So that's kind of my history. Any questions? Okay, awesome. So before we jump into the creativity, I wanted to ask each of you to partner up with the person next to you and introduce yourselves. Just say your name, your organization or your business that you're working on or that you're a part of, really anything that you're a part of, and why you're here in this group, why you came to this presentation today. All right, go for it. So, my presentation is kind of based on what you can do for yourself if you feel like you're in a creative slump. If you feel like you're not feeling very creative. And this actually came up because when Amy came into the tea house and asked me to do this, she said, Melissa, I think you'd be really great giving a presentation at 406 Creatives. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not creative. I work in retail, I work in restaurants, and is this supposed to be about art? Is this supposed to be about design? I don't feel like I work in the creative industry, per se. So, gosh, I'm just not creative. I don't think I can do this. And luckily, I started researching creativity. I said to myself, well, okay, back up. I don't think I'm creative, but do I actually know what creativity is? Do I know what that means? Maybe I do fit into whatever the paradigm of creativity is. So I was doing some research, and before I go into what I found, one thing that I ran across was an article that was published by some faculty at the University of Maryland. It was a philosophy faculty, but they had published an article that said creativity would be an idea, a behavior, or a product that is novel, so it's new, and valuable from the perspective of the creator or the larger community. And creative thought, which begins to develop in early childhood through imaginative play, serves as a function in adult life. And psychological creativity, the ability to have an imaginative faculty, is quite widespread, and it's a trait that almost all human adults possess to a significant degree. So I got to like take a big sigh of relief and say, oh, okay. Whatever this creativity is, I've got it. Like, because the University of Maryland faculty said so through their objective research. So I said, okay, I've got to be creative in some way. So let's explore this a little further. What is creativity then, and how does it apply to me? And I just ended up Googling the definition for creativity. And I had this on the PowerPoint, but dictionary.com describes creativity as the ability to transcend traditional ideas and to create meaningful new ideas, forms, or methods. And relative terms are originality, progressiveness, or imagination. So I'm making my PowerPoint as we go. And the Urban Dictionary I use too because I just like to use it for fun, and it's also kind of a creative platform. It said, a creative person is a person with a desire to produce based on originality and expression. And this desire to produce impacts nearly every aspect of their life. So I'm going to hold these up. So those are essentially the adjectives or the synonyms that are usually related to creativity, or what we might think of as creativity. We've got expressive, imaginative, original, new or novel, and transcending tradition, ideas that transcend tradition. So when I read these definitions, I thought, whoa, like that's actually kind of heavy. That's actually a lot of requisites to meet, in order to be labeled as creative. Does this really make sense to me? Do I meet all of these? Do I fall into this criteria? And it turns out that I don't think I really fall into all of this criteria. First of all, I wanted to ask myself which parts apply to me and which don't. And I feel like before I get into explaining what I discovered about myself, I was going to ask everyone to turn to your partner again and just tell your partner, out of all these bullet-pointed adjectives, which two best describe you creatively? When you talk about yourself and your creative abilities, which of these adjectives lines up with you the best? All right, go ahead. Okay. So I hope that was enough time. And while I'm saying my next sentence, I would really appreciate it if you have your Sharpie and your construction paper, just write down the one or two on your paper that fit the best with you, so you can kind of take it with you and keep it in your mind. All right, I will hold this up while you're writing. And I'll talk about mine. So when I was looking at all of these terms, I decided that I identified with about 3 of them. And actually, it's the 3 on the red page here. Expressive, imaginative, and original. And the way in which I think I can best display that relation to these terms is through one of the creative activities that I enjoy doing, and that is writing poetry. So sometimes I write poetry. And when I write, I'm inspired to express some sort of feeling or some sort of impression. So that's the expressive part. And I'm imaginative with the words and the imagery that I'm using to portray my expression. So imaginative. And for the most part, my poetry and my writing is original, pretty much. But even within those 3 terms, there's a lot of wiggle room. Honestly, when I do write poetry, I actually really enjoy using the ideas and sometimes even the exact direct words of my favorite poets in my writing. And I think that's okay because I only read my poetry at the open mics at the tea house anyway. So, you know, I'm not publishing or anything. I'm just creating for me. And I feel like, you know, just that fact that I like to use other people's stuff doesn't necessarily make me 100% original. It's not like all of my ideas are brand new and original all the time. And the other thing that out of these that I felt like I didn't really fit in with that helped me narrow it down was this transcending tradition. I think that's a really cool idea, but I feel like it's not every single time that I write or come up with an idea that it has so much genius that it is completely new and just is transcendental of all of the creative stuff that has come before me. I'm building on those things and I use those things a lot, but I don't feel like every time I'm transcending that past awesome creativity. So really, to narrow it down, I think for me, it's just the top two, really, for me. Expressive and imaginative. And as I was getting this presentation ready, I kind of had to stop and I had an aha moment because I was reflecting back to that idea that, oh gosh, I'm not creative. I don't think I'm creative at all. And then I thought, well, okay, wait, I've asked myself a bunch of questions. I've discovered that I am imaginative and expressive. Why am I that way? Well, for me, the mechanism that helps me get that way is inquiry. It helps me come up with ideas. So asking questions and being inquisitive is what inspires my imagination, and it's what gets me going, and it's what helps me be expressive, and it helps me come up with my ideas. So I decided to define creativity, or the creative process, for me personally. It's imagination and expression achieved through inquiry. So as we're going along today, maybe just take this in your mind as you go home, even after this, and you can come up with your own, like, one sentence description of what is creativity to you. For me, it's imagination and expression achieved through inquiry. So we got there. Now we know what creativity is. We got through just the first step of figuring out how to be creative. First, you have to know what creativity is. So next, I was going to actually direct you to the second page in your packet. So this is the facilitating creativity part. Facilitating creativity through inquiry. This is the process that's helpful for me, that I would use and that I actually have used, I discovered, in other scenarios, to help brainstorm and come up with new and novel ideas, and to come up with a creative end product. So it should say something like basic rubric on the top, yeah, and it's got 7 columns that have questions in them. And these questions are questions that you can ask to help prompt or inspire your imagination or expression about a project that you might be stumped on. And you could do this at home on maybe a painting project that you're working on. Maybe you just want to sit down and produce a piece, and your goal is to get something painted by the end of the day, and you just have no idea what that actually is going to be. You could ask yourself some of these questions, or you could use it in your entrepreneurial fashion, or as a tool to get you moving in your business, or maybe a nonprofit organization that you're serving on a board or something like that. You can use it collaboratively as a group within your organization and ask each other these questions and brainstorm together as a group how you're going to get from point A, kind of stuck, come up with an idea, to point B, ending with a creative, tangible product. So just going through the rubric really fast, and I had all this on the slides, so I'm going to try my best. I thought that it might be fun to pretend like I had just filled this out for 406 Creatives. So the first one, number 1, column number 1, the question that you can ask yourself or your group is based on our mission or our vision. What is our purpose? Why are we here? What are we doing? And so I looked it up, and the mission or the goal of 406 Creatives, and sorry I don't have it right in front of me, is something like to bring together creative individuals for a hit of inspiration in the morning once a month. I think it's something like that, right? Okay, so that's your mission. But something that I think is really helpful during this first inquiry stage is to take that mission and brainstorm some adjectives that kind of gives it a deeper purpose, like what we did with our definition, where we came up with our adjectives via the other creativity definitions. So I did this on my PowerPoint, and I thought, okay, so the mission is to bring creatives together once a month to learn something and to maybe foster community. So the adjectives that I put on there were education and community and collaboration and learning. So things like that. And so you have this list of adjectives that kind of deepen your purpose. And then in the second column, your next question is, well, what are we already doing to employ these purposes? Well, currently we're meeting in the library once a month. We're doing that. That's awesome. Okay. Question 3 is, what further action can we take, or what new project can we implement that will help us further manifest those purposes? Well, for fostering community, for example, which is one of the purposes in the mission, you could have a networking section where at the beginning of the talk you exchange business cards and you tell each other why you're here and you get to know each other like we did today. You could make that a regular thing. There's an idea. So if you decide that's going to be your idea, then who's going to do it? Let's say Amy's going to do it. She's going to come up with a networking activity. She's going to have it prepared by the deadline. So she's going to put together whatever tools she needs. She just needs herself and her research and her creative skills. Maybe she needs some help, some friends, a little committee. And she's going to have a networking thing ready for the next luncheon. So using this rubric of inquiry, you can ask yourself some questions, you can brainstorm as a group, come up with ideas, and then come up with a roadmap to execute the ideas and come up with your end product. And so then you get through from point A to point B, and you come full circle with your process, and you've facilitated yourself through creating something when maybe you couldn't have done it by yourself, or you didn't have the right tools or information to even start. So that's just one example of many resources that you can use to facilitate creativity. In your packet, we aren't going to go through it, but I put another similar style of rubric that's called SMART goals, and a lot of you may have heard of those before. Oftentimes it's used for goal setting in business. But that's kind of a similar thing. You're asking yourselves questions, you're making yourself a timeline, you're giving yourself a roadmap to complete what you're doing. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that collaboration is really important, and it can be really helpful when you're trying to be imaginative and creative. So doing things as a group and having other people ask you the questions can help you come up with your answers organically. Like when we partnered up and your partner asked you, who are you, what are you doing? Sometimes it's easier to answer that to someone else, to just be relaxed and have that answer organically come from who you are, than you just sitting by yourself and trying to ask yourself those questions. Having another perspective and being able to bounce ideas off of one another can be really, really helpful. So you can do collaborative inquiry with one person, you can do it with a group, and just to shout out for the last ladies who are here, you could do it with something like a mastermind, which was the beautifully equipped ladies that were here last week or last month. That's also like a structured inquiry process that you can do as a group to creatively come up with new ideas. And then the last thing I had on my PowerPoint was that if you need any more resources, I'm happy to be a resource for you. I did put my business card on your packet, and Another hat that I wear and another role that I play in the community outside from owning my business is I am actually really active in another networking group called Bozeman Business and Professional Women. And we're a networking group that's made for and by women, but we're actually open. We invite anyone in. So you can be a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. You can come to all of our programs. We are totally welcoming, regardless of any gender identities or anything. So if you want to come to any of our programs, you're welcome to. And the other cool thing is that if you go to our website, which I listed on the back of my business card, even if you don't want to come to any of the activities that we do or the programs that we present, they're all pretty much educational. Our mission is similar, to facilitate community and to educate people. If you scroll down to the bottom of the About page, there's a link that says a list of more organizations like ours in Gallatin Valley. And 406 Creatives is on the list, but it's like a 3-page list. I was actually gonna leave a copy with Amy in case you want it. But it's like a 3-page list that you can just look on. And if you're like Quinn, is that your name? If you're like Quinn and you're looking for other groups to also just kind of bop around in and see what's up, you could check some of these out and just keep expanding your community wider and wider and keep getting more people to talk to, more people to brainstorm with, and to help you facilitate your creativity. All right. I think that's it. Thank you. So does anyone have any questions? It can be about anything and everything. Presentation or me or anything.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You all are pretty creative in the types of events that you have at the tea house. I see dancing, I see game night, poetry. I assume part of that is to get people to come in and, you know, purchase your product, but how do you decide what kinds of events you want to have? There must be some kind of creative process there.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I love giving this answer, and I think this answer is really helpful. It's kind of like that idea of being like a yes man or a yes woman and being willing to say yes. I actually didn't come up with any of the events that happen at the tea house. Those were all organizations and clubs that came in and just asked at the front counter, can I talk to the manager? We want to have an event here. And they emailed me and they said, this is our idea. How about it? And I said, yes, let's do it. So my role really has, again, still been that like facilitation role. Other people come up with these great ideas and I just like make a map to make it happen. So I'm really glad that people ask me questions and that come in and want to do events. If anyone brings you ideas, consider saying yes, like trying it out. What have you got to lose? And then if it turns out it's not working, especially in your business, in a business setting, then you have to resolve that and come to close it. But yeah. Yeah, Quinn.
So back, was it 2010 you graduated, when you and Scott were trying to be like, you know, what's the next step? Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Was it like, did you kind of decide at some point you wanted to own a tea house and like work backwards to be like, how do we get to that point? Or was it like, you know what, we're just going to get a job and from there, like, see what happens? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, so I can just elaborate on how we did that. So what had actually been going on was while we were dating and in college, we had come up with some just fun, random incarnations of ideas of what to do after school. And it started out with maybe opening a bakery, because while we were in college, Scott was working as a baker. So he was doing something that he was enjoying, and he was kind of liking it, and he said, just in passing, ooh, maybe we could own a bakery someday. So we took that and we, drew out like what our cute little bakery might look like and made a plan and had fun with it. And then he was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting really tired. I can't get up at 3 in the morning anymore every day. I have no social life because I'm like a sophomore in college. So he was like, let's not do that. Let's scratch that. Let's just play for a while and something else will come. And so I was like, okay. I'm flexible. I can just flow with what's happening. And so then a while later, I came up with the idea because I had been working as a barista in many different capacities. In the past, I've worked as a bartender, I've worked as a server and a waitress. And so I've always been in the service industry. I've always been in food service in particular. And I was working at this little cafe, and I said, oh, we could have a breakfast cafe. Yeah, we could do that. And so then we took our old bakery thing that we had, a cute little drawn out thing with bubble words and stick figures on, and we changed that and made it into a little cafe. And we said, okay, well, we made a menu, what could we serve? How would it work? How would we get people to work for us? How many people would we need? And then I thought, as we got deeper and deeper into even just that night of throwing out ideas, I was like, this is really complicated. And managing food and food safety is so hard. And managing the amount of product that you have to come in, and knowing the risks that you need to take and the amount of food that you might lose if people don't come in, all those risks, I was like, okay, that sounds too stressful. I don't want to be too stressed in life, and I totally have the agency to do what I want. So I'm not going to be stressed. I'm just going to let that pass, and something else will come. And so then, like I said, then at one point we were just taking a walk. It was my weekend, and I'd been working for a couple years during school I got hired as a handyman at a vineyard. It was awesome. That's one of the cool things about being born and raised in Montana is that your neighbors always just have projects, They're like, I built my own house, I need somebody to mow my lawn, I need someone to help me build my chicken coop and put my roofing on. And so then you're just you just get the neighbor kid to come help. So I got to do that over in Livingston with my good friend Rich Berg and his wife. Michael Ann was actually a midwife for a long time in the community. So if you have kids, maybe she birthed your kids with you, I don't know. But I learned a lot of those skills just through that sort of apprenticeship and through that oral tradition and that way of people teaching you through learning and just doing it with them. So I had a bunch of skills. I got hired as a handyman, and I was working at this vineyard, and then I just started picking up everything. It was a small family business, and I was managing employees there, and I was booking music, and I was managing the catering at the weddings, and I was bartending the weddings, and so it was a lot. And then I only took 1 day off a week, and I would go up to Portland, which is where Scott was living, and I was living in a tent on my friend's property. And I would go up there, and one day we were on a walk in Forest Park, and he just said, gosh, I don't know what to do. And that's when we had that conversation where I said, well, what's your true passion? And we had that conversation where it was let's just dig deep and find something that you love, even if it's not a credible business idea at all, and then see what happens from there. So that's when he said, well, tea is obviously the thing that I've always had under the surface that I've never wanted to bring up. So that's kind of how we got there. Yeah. So it's just, you're just working places and doing whatever, and things come up, and you trial and error, and you go hash through ideas and throw some away and improve them and make new ones. Good question.
It sounded like you developed a strategy of trying to learn about how to do that kind of business like a tea shop by taking jobs in related industries or companies.
Yeah, so once we did decide that that's what we wanted to do, then yes, we did have a strategy where Scott said, okay, all I'm going to do is apply for jobs that specifically have to do with tea and herbs and importing and exporting tea and blending herbs and cultivating them and learning everything I can about that specific industry. And so he did that, and so that was his plan. And he also did a lot of research. He was the one who went out and located all of the various workshops and various short educational programs where we could go and pay for a workshop about QuickBooks or pay for a workshop about how to make a business plan, the condensed versions, and rented, how to build a business for dummies from the library, things like that. So he was tasked with that, and I was tasked with figuring out how generally just like the full picture of running a small business. And I was able to do that because I was working for a small family business at the Vineyard. So my task was to really look at things like hiring practices, management practices, payroll, and how to do that with people, and how to like approach managing employees, and best practices in that regard. And then like sort of the all-around problem solving aspect of like what happens when you need to fix a problem. Like if you're renting a property and you need to fix the sink, do you do it? Do you call the plumber? Like what are your resources in a community? So that was sort of my role. I got to learn that through my other job as well. So yeah, we utilized our jobs to learn the skills that we needed. Good question. Any other questions?
All right, well, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you.